It's movie time, YouTube time. Run, run. Come on.
I've been running like a mile, 3 miles already.
Go, I'm filming. Run. You're famous. Alright, so here you go. You can see that the BRS stove has a difficult time boiling this water. There, it's coming up right now. Look at that. The BRS stove sucks, man. I mean, I don't know. There's not even the slightest chance in hell I'm gonna keep using it. It makes an extremely dangerous ball of fire that I don't want near nothing. I don't want it near the woods, and I don't want it near my stuff. I don't know why the hell people use it. I don't know why the hell people recommend it. Yeah, some people say they can get it for 15 bucks. I definitely didn't pay 15 bucks for it. I paid like 25 bucks for it. It doesn't work. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It's making like a napalm bomb of uncontrolled fire all over the place. I don't know why anybody would use it or recommend it or copy it, replicate it, whatever. I don't know what's going on with this stove. Okay, so you guys got a glimpse of what I'm dealing with my BRS stove. As far as I'm concerned, it's not working out. This food that I got, Backpacker's Pantry, it calls for the maximum amount of water that I can fit into my, what is that company? Evernew. I got an Evernew mug pot, and it calls for like 520 liters, which is like filling the Evernew mug pot up to the brim. So I did that. I got the BeFree filter out, filled up the mug pot to the brim, and boiled the water. And you saw that, like, when the water boiled, it caused the stove to like flare up and shoot fire all over the place, and then eventually just went out. And you know, the United States is a free country, and people are more than welcome to sell half-baked gear if they want. Like, for instance, if somebody sells a windbreaker that doesn't protect you from the wind, as soon as it starts raining, as soon as the windbreaker gets wet, it won't protect you from the wind anymore. That's kind of a half-baked piece of gear, and maybe it shouldn't be on the market, but you know, so what? I mean, it's a free country, and people are allowed to do whatever the hell they want to do. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with making backpacking gear that isn't that great, that only sort of works and doesn't really work in a lot of situations. It's not that big a deal. But I'm always looking for a reason to make a YouTube video. So, you know, just trolling and talking about gear that sucks, it seems like an obvious way to get a video done. And people watch videos like that, right? I mean, people like watching negative YouTube videos, so I'm totally gonna do it. Let's do it. Right away, let's talk about famous YouTube hikers. They don't like trolls, you know what I mean? I know that every single famous YouTube hiker on YouTube would hate it if I mentioned them in a trolling video. But let's talk about like the legitimacy of famous YouTube hikers, who they are and what they do. The way that I got into hiking, I was a world traveler. I spent about 36 months on the road in other countries. I started off visiting the pyramids and Petra, and then I spent 11 months in Brazil, like trying to learn how to surf and whatever. I'm from California, so I wanted to spend some time at the beach. I spent about 18 months altogether in South America in 2003 and 2002, and then in 2013 I spent about 10 months in Southeast Asia, and I spent another 11 months in South America in 2016. the trip that I took to South America was so expensive that that's what caused me to think about thru hiking for budgeting reasons, you know, just doing it for cheaper. I got really into stealth camping and cowboy camping. And yeah, I can't, hotels internationally are about $45 a night. So it's easy to spend about $5,000 a month world traveling if you do whatever you want. And yeah, it's just too expensive. I just can't do it. So I switched to camping and I focused all my attention on camping, but I've actually been really into camping since about 2005 because I always wanted to incorporate it into my world traveling. But I never really successfully did it. I'm still working on it. I just recently started learning about camping, you know, cooking dehydrated meals. It's something that I'm working on all the time. But before I started watching YouTube channels about hiking, I used to watch YouTube channels about cameras because I was a world traveler with, and I took a lot of travel photos. So I used to watch a lot of videos about the Fuji cameras. I know in hiking everybody's into the Sony cameras, but I'm actually really into the Fuji cameras. And there used to be this YouTube channel that more or less exclusively talked about Fuji and Olympus mirrorless cameras for travel, and it was called Digital Rev. And on Digital Rev, there were these three like YouTube celebrities, Kai, Lambie, and this other skinny dude who was like a smart friend of theirs. And they would go to like Taiwan, and they were from Tokyo, but they lived in Hong Kong, and they owned like a camera shop, and they had like a show. It was a YouTube show, just like in hiking, exactly the same as hiking, very similar. And I watched the YouTube channel so much. I watched Digital Rev all the time. And there was this one episode of Digital Rev where they actually showed that Kai and Lambie and the other dude were not really friends, that they were actors. And the show was like a fake reality show. And it showed them standing in front of the camera with like a director. And the director was telling them like, cut, you know, say that, do those lines again, like take that shot again, you know? And they didn't know each other. They were total strangers, and they were like standing there with these glum kind of like frowny faces. And they were getting bossed around by their boss. And the show was completely fake, you know? And it was like a reality show. It was just like the hiking shows. So I've never seen a hiking video that caused me to particularly think that the video was fake. But I know that in cameras, I did watch a YouTube channel that it looked real, but it wasn't. It was fake. You know, and that show's still on. It's a Digital Rev, and the star of it is Kai. And if you notice, like when Kai describes the cameras, a lot of the time he doesn't know nothing about the camera. He's just reading the specs off of the manual. Like he's just reading a cue card, you know? So, and I love that show, Digital Rev, but I kind of got out of it. I kind of stopped watching it because I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was fake, you know? And I don't necessarily think that that's wrong. It's a free country, you know, and people can do whatever the hell they want to do. If people want to come out with a fake YouTube channel and pretend like it's real because it's awesome or whatever, because the guys are sexy or whatever, it's all good to me. I don't care. But okay, but I do have one gripe as a troll when it comes to like pack materials. Okay, the Wasabi Green Grid Stop Dyneema that's used on the Mountain Laurel Designs Burn is 1 ounce per square yard. Now it's mislabeled, okay, as 4.8 ounces per square yard. Now the price of Mountain Laurel Designs gear has gone up by $20. The core used to cost $80 and now it costs $100. If the reason for that is because they're using a burlier kind of grid stop, then that would make sense, because I owned a core in Wasabi Green and it was 1 ounce per square yard. Now the price has gone up $20 and people are, you know, emailing me saying, it's not 1 ounce, dude, it's 4.8 ounces. It's heavier than the waterproof version. I'm telling you it is, and I'm wearing the core on my back right now. And I had the green one, I had the Wasabi Green, and the pack that I'm wearing is way heavier than the Wasabi Green. So basically what I'm trying to get at is that not only is it possible for some of these YouTube channels to be fake, like the actors who you see in the YouTube channel have got nothing to do with anything. They don't know nothing about hiking, and they're spinning you a yard they're spinning you a story long enough to sew a sweater, or however you want to say it. By mislabeling really lightweight pack materials, that allows cottage companies to get away with selling heavier packs because the specs make it look like the pack is the same weight as lighter materials by saying that the lighter materials are heavier. So the Wasabi Green Gridstop is only 1 ounce per square yard, but it's listed as almost 5. And that's allowing other pack companies to sell 5 ounce per square yard Dyneema hybrid. And that's a way burlier, heavier pack, you know, than what's necessary. I mean, yeah, it's more durable and there's gonna be less complaints about people blowing out their packs. But those packs are burlier and heavier, a lot burlier and a lot heavier than what people were using like 5 years ago. The Wasabi Green versions of the MLD packs are uber light. And they're mislabeled as being heavier. I mean, on the MLD website, it says that the Wasabi Green packs are heavier than the waterproof packs. It's the total opposite. So yeah, I'm hiking up out of Muir Woods right now, and I just got to use a Leica. If you don't know what that is, man, it's like, I just took a picture of this family for them with like a $12,000 camera. So insane, dude, it was so crazy. But okay, so hammock hanging. Saw a pretty awesome video recently talking trash about hammock hanging. So the underquilt hangs too far away from the person's butt when they hang their hammock, and if the wind blows, it blows the little bit of warm air that's in between the person's butt and the underquilt out from in between their butt and the underquilt. So imagine you're in a hammock and you've got a blanket underneath the hammock. There's warm air gathering in between you and the blanket that's underneath you. But then the wind blows and it blows that pocket of warm air out, making your butt cold. That's why hammocks suck compared to ground sleeping. All right, well, why not just sew ClimaShield Apex into the bottom of your hammock? You know, ClimaShield Apex was developed by the U.S. Marine Corps. It is a hollow fibered polyester strand insulation. So it's like hairs of polyester that are hollow that collect warmth. It works very, very similar to a styrofoam coffee cup. It's also waterproof. You could just sew 2.5 inch thick ClimaShield Apex, or 2.5 ounce per square yard ClimaShield Apex to your hammock and lay on it. That would keep the cold air out and the warm air in your hammock without allowing the wind to blow in between you and your insulation. Exactly the same as it works on any jacket or top quilt. You know, just turn the hammock into a quilt. The BRS stove is hyped up on the internet. I have it, I bought it because it's all over the internet. A lot of thru hikers are saying that they used it on their thru hike. It sometimes doesn't boil water in a light breeze. People say, oh, you can go on eBay and get the titanium foil and use the titanium foil from eBay as a windscreen, and then use the BRS stove like that. Maybe, but the BRS stove makes a ball of fire, and it kind of shoots the flames out to the sides, and in kind of an uncontrolled manner, it could seriously light your vestibule storm doors on fire or your pack on fire. I've heard people say that they use their food bag as a windscreen. The BRS stove shoots flames out to the sides and lights stuff on fire that's next to it. I lit my Z-Pack sit pad on fire. The Z-Pack Z-Pack's sit pad works as a fire starter. If you were freezing to death on the AT or something, you could stick your sit pad underneath some kindling and light it and light your fire. It works as an awesome fire starter. But it'll light on fire if you use it as a windscreen. I've heard people saying they use their Thermarest sit pad as a windscreen. Those things light on fire. And the BRS stove particularly shoots flames out to the sides. It makes a big uncontrolled ball of fire. I'm completely unimpressed by it. I mean, and also Soto, who are like the main competitors with BRS, they make an identical version of the BRS stove. So if you want to buy another version of that same exact stove, Soto sell it. They sell a 1 ounce stove that looks exactly like the BRS. They also sell the Windmaster, which is kind of like the go-to. That's the best stove. Everybody loves it. And I desperately want to get it. But what's even crazier is Soto make another BRS. They make a copy of the BRS. All right, so the Big Agnes Flat Creek tent is a bug bivvy with basically like a parachute tarp over it that has like an igloo door on the parachute tarp. The parachute tarp needs to be staked out super skillfully because it's basically just shaped like a big parachute. And so even though it has a frame, the poles on the frame just become extra kit in your pack because it is still a tarp that needs to be staked out. It isn't really freestanding. The frame, all it does is just it holds the tarp away from your face while you lay inside of a bug bivvy. And if you're familiar with bivvies, if you've ever slept in a bivvy, you know that there's no room inside of a bivvy. It's extremely difficult to even lay on your back and look at your phone while you're in a bivvy. It's difficult to read a book while you're in a bivvy. You cannot do anything at all except for lay on your back and shut your eyes and try to go to sleep while you're in a bivvy. So that kind of like defeats the purpose of being in a tent. If there's a bivvy inside of the tent, you're in a bivvy underneath a tent wall. But there's more problems than that with the Flat Creek. Other than that, it needs to be staked out just as good as a tarp tent. Okay, so there's no ventilation. It isn't open, all right? It's enclosed with no vents. The only vent is the door. And the door is shaped like an igloo. It's a condensation machine, and the tent gets extremely wet, including the door. The door isn't really big enough to get in and out of without touching the door. And so you're gonna get wet just from the condensation that's around the door every single time you get in and out. This real estate inside of the tent, regardless of the bug bivvy, is extremely small. So the tent fills up with like warm, humid air, which makes it kind of suffocating and more or less impossible to fall asleep. So you have to leave the front door of the tent wide open while you start to fall asleep. And then right before you pass out, you have to somehow stick your arms out of the bivvy and zip the door shut, and then finally go to sleep, like on cue, in order to make the tent work. Then about 4 o'clock in the morning, you're gonna realize that you are much, much, much colder inside of the tent than the air outside of the tent. And the reason for that is the tent is getting super, super wet from condensation. The temperature inside the tent is slightly warmer than the outside air. That's causing condensation. Condensation is when all of the moisture in the dirt underneath your shelter, as well as the moisture that's inside the tent with you, in your body, etc., the sweat that's sitting on you, etc., all of that moisture is turning into fog, and that fog is settling on the outside wall of your shelter. The spot at which the outside cold air and the inside warm air touch is where that fog will settle and turn into droplets of rain, basically making like a rainforest inside of a little tiny tent. All right, but water is always colder than air. So I mean, a good way to test that is just walk up to a freezing cold lake or a river, put your hand on the dirt, and then put your hand in the water. You're gonna see that the water is colder than the dirt, and there's no legitimate reason for that. They should be the same temperature. The dirt and the water should be the same temperature. They're exposed to the same temperature. They're exposed to the same air. But water is always cooler. H2O molecules have the ability to slow down molecules and allow those molecules to become cool. So the temperature of your tent wall is going to be colder than the air. And because the space inside of the Fly Creek tent is so small that what happens is you come super, super close to the walls of the tent while you're sleeping inside of that bug bivvy. So you have no room to move because you're inside of a bug bivvy. And you're sleeping super, super close to the walls of the tent. The walls of the tent are totally wet, and the temperature of that nylon is actually colder than the outside air. It's cooling off the air that's touching it inside the tent. So even though you're developing a small pocket of warm air inside of the tent, the temperature of the tent wall is so cold that it's refrigerating the air close to that tent wall inside of the tent. And because you're sleeping so close to the tent wall, it's cooling off the warm air that's coming from your sleeping bag. So your sleeping bag is collecting most of your warm air. And it's not really projecting that much warm air up above you, only a little. But the tent walls around you are so cold that they can easily cool off that warm air and cause the entire inside of the tent to be much colder than the outside air. So if you had been cowboy camping out in the open, you would have been warmer than you are inside of those little tents. Which is kind of the concept behind the Plexamid from Z-Packs. The Plexamid from Z-Packs is a little tiny tent which protects you from the wind and the rain and allows you to sit up and cook. But it's more or less open. The storm doors on the tent don't really enclose the sleeper inside of it in a way that creates a separate environment from the outside air. So the temperature inside the Plexamid is very similar to the temperature outside of the tent. Yeah, you might develop a pocket of warm air inside of that tent, maybe. But most of the time, because the storm doors are wide open, the temperature inside the tent is going to be the same as outside, which is actually warmer than with other small tents. A lot of nylon small tents get super, super cold inside because of all the moisture that gets soaked into that material. That H2O, that water, gets cold. It cools off the air inside the tent. If the tent is super small, all of the air inside of the tent will start to get cold because the tent walls are cooling it off. If your tent is big, like if it's a 3-person tent, it's possible for the edges of the tent to get cold while the middle of the tent can get warm from body heat. If you don't allow any wind to blow into the tent, blowing that pocket of warm air out. So basically, like, you've got the EMS Velocity, the MSR Hubba, the Big Agnes Fly Creek, and you've got a bunch of other little tiny tents. All of those little tiny tents are going to be kind of cold. Like, for instance, I think Big Agnes, they've got the Scout. I think it's called the Scout 2. If you get the Carbon Scout 2, which is made out of Cuban fiber, that is going to be warmer than the nylon version, because the nylon is going to get saturated with water from condensation, and the temperature inside of the Scout made of nylon is going to cool off. It's going to get cold. The carbon version made out of Cuban fiber isn't really going to soak up as much moisture, and the temperature inside of the Carbon Scout is going to be closer to the outside air, which is actually warmer than you would have been if you had slept in the nylon version of the same tent. All right, Ultra. I hate to do this to Ultra because I love Ultra. They sent me a free pair of shoes, and my Olympuses are awesome. They're like total Coachella shoes, man. Like awesome, like music festival shoes. And they feel like pogo sticks under your feet, especially when they're new. They're like incredible. But they're really like platform shoes. Oh shit, there's a bunch of Cub Scouts here. I don't know if you can see that, but going past a bunch of like a whole entire Cub Scout troop. I'm not sure what's going on here. Anyway, you know, basically the Lone Peaks are barefoot shoes. I own several barefoot shoes, and barefoot shoes have got a pretty thick sole on the bottom of them that protect your feet. The Lone Peaks have got a softer sole on the bottom than barefoot shoes. And then the Olympus, which is the other shoe that I'm using from Ultra, I'm getting into some pretty difficult scrambling right here, getting around these Cub Scouts, and there, look at these kids. Here they come. Pretty funny. Whoa.
Stop. It is too hard. Flash flood.
Flash flood?
Definitely the biggest one. Yes. Ariana, really strong. See? Oh my God, how did it withstand my dam?
All right.
See, it can go.
So anyway.
everywhere.
So the Olympuses are kind of moving around under my heels, like they wiggle, you know. So when I step on this terrain over here, on the hillside, to get down to this trail, they wiggle under your heel. I mean, I don't know about, you know, basically the Lone Peaks are they give you so much contact with the trail that they promote foot fatigue. Your foot is too close to the trail. And with the Olympus, they're a high heel shoe. And on most terrain, you know, like throughout the day, they're really fun to wear. I mean, they're awesome shoes. I honestly, I really admire them. They're great shoes. But they wiggle a lot, just like a high heel shoe. I saw a lady walk out of a restaurant in San Francisco recently, and she almost broke her legs. She was wearing gigantic high heel shoes, and her hands were full of food. Like, she had soup for an entire office. I'm not sure what was going on, but she had a huge plastic bag full of soup for a whole entire office. She stepped out of the restaurant onto the sidewalk and almost broke her ankle because she was wearing like humongous high heel shoes. The Olympuses are high heels too. I mean, for me, they're 2 inches off the ground, and they wiggle. When you scramble on difficult terrain, on an incline or on a decline, they wiggle underneath your heel. They turn to the side a lot. So, I don't know what to say about that. You know, the Lone Peaks are hyped up on the internet. Now, let's talk for a second about communication on the internet. In 1999, I worked for a .com called Medicine Planet. And I was working for the owners of Macy's. The CEO of Macy's used to be named Phil Schlane. And I was working for his son, who was CEO of a .com called Medicine Planet, and I was a content researcher there for their website. When I worked at the .com with the guys from Macy's, I found out that Ashcroft and GW were making 3G illegal because they thought it promoted work addiction. So it is possible for our founding fathers, like from the Purge, right? Founding fathers, the leaders of our country, it's possible for them to outlaw certain things in order to get you to go back to work or not to work too much. So like 3G, like wireless internet and Wi-Fi, whatever, it wasn't legalized for a long time because the presidents of the United States, they felt like it would cause people to work too much and it would be like a negative thing. There's a lot of camping gear out there that kind of like sabotages the camper or the backpacker so that they're not able to fulfill their mission. For instance, like if the drone light from MSR leaks and gets water all over your pack, that's going to send you going back to the car. That's going to get you to go back to the car and quit and go back to work sooner. Because we're not spending too much money when you go camping. I mean, this is a really budget-friendly kind of extracurricular activity here. We're not staying in hotels. We're not spending that much money. We're not helping the economy by working or by paying for anything. So by creating gear that kind of prevents you from doing your through hike or whatever it is and getting you to go back to work, that, you know, that could be intentional. There are situations where that might actually be intentional. So like hyping up the Lone Peak causes foot fatigue because you have too much contact with the trail. That's going to cause people to stop hiking after a day or two when they would have hiked for a month, you know? Somebody who was going to hike for 2 months, if they're by the Lone Peak, they might stop after just like one weekend and just go home and go back to work, which is better for the economy. So there's a lot of camping gear that mysteriously kind of fails almost intentionally, like as if it's designed to fail. And then it'll become super popular on the internet. And the people who are promoting it on the internet kind of come into question, like, are they an actual person who's promoting this product? Or are they an actor who's just doing their acting thing? You know, actors are artists. I like to make some basic art. My art this is it. I mean, it's kind of basic. But there are other people out there who like to take it to another level you know, like acting like in Shakespeare or whatever. I don't do none of that. I'm not an actor, dude. I don't know nothing about acting, but other guys do it, especially in the military and for police stations and stuff. You got undercover cops at police stations who are actors. You've got, in the military, you've got intelligence operatives who are actors. There are some militaries who rely heavily on actors, like Israel. The Israeli military focus heavily on intelligence operatives. Tom Cruise is a good example of a guy who acts a lot. You know, he's like a tough guy who's like a total actor. He's like a total soldier actor, dude. There's lots of, you know, some guys are into that. Some guys are into acting. And if the government wants them to promote camping gear that will get campers to go back to work, then they will. I mean, it's possible to buy an RV, for instance, that's kind of faulty. You know, there's possible to buy an RV that doesn't really get warm enough in the snow. It'll get you to go rent an apartment because it was never intended to really, you know, prevent you from needing an apartment, etc. So, you know, it's just food for thought. It's something to think about. You know, when you buy something, you're gambling. When you go to a casino, you put your money on the table. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Most of the time you lose. When you go to REI, it's the same thing. You're trusting somebody else to create a camping product for you that you think is going to be foolproof, and it's not. You gotta gamble on it. You spend your money on it, you try it, you gamble with it, and you try it for a while, and you see if it works or not. You become familiar with it. You figure out what uses you can have for it. I'm starting to realize that maybe like a bigger pack, like the Verga from Granite Gear, just full of gear, some winter gear, some summer gear, just different kinds of gear, like having like a smorgasbord of gear variety in my pack. That might be a good idea. If you really want to spend a lot of time outside, you might need different gear for different situations than just have a pack full of like a variety of different gear. I'm literally thinking of carrying my summer bag and my winter bag at the same time. Like just carry 2 sleeping bags. Maybe even carry 2 3/4 torso air pads, because if I meet somebody, like say if I find a new girlfriend, I could carry 2 3/4 torso air pads and 2 sleeping bags in my pack and share it with another person, you know, and take them with me on the trail. But, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it seems less is more. Sometimes it seems like more is more. You know, more is better. Bigger is better, or maybe less is more. You know, it's hard to say. But, yeah.